So this is something we saw last week. We didn't have time to test it, but we have indeed found time to test it, which is to say that we had a couple of people point out to us that on the PC version of Doom: The Dark Ages, you can enable full statistics, to see what's happening in the game, full performance statistics. And it turns out that you can actually use those same statistics in both Xbox versions of the game. And Oliver, you've done this. You've actually tested it out. You've validated it. It does work. And it's quite interesting, right? Can you first of all tell us how you do this so other people can replicate it? And then secondly, how those performance stats checked out on the Xbox consoles?
Yeah, so basically what you need to do is you need to log into the PC Xbox app there and download Doom: The Dark Ages. I had the Game Pass version of the title there. And go into the settings menu and enable performance metrics, and ideally set it to like the ultra nightmare performance metrics, right, which is an amusing term. It just means like the most extensive performance metrics that you can get. And then make sure that game is saved and it syncs to your Xbox. Then load up the game on Xbox, and that settings preset will basically be saved. So you'll have the performance metrics on your Xbox system, whether that's a Series S or Series X in Doom: The Dark Ages. And you have a number of metrics that come up on screen, some more interesting than others. You get a frame rate readout, a frame counter. You get average, minimum, maximum, and last numbers for your total frame time, your CPU frame time, although we can discuss in a moment that's not exactly accurate, and your GPU frame time. And then you have a readout for frame rate, your total frame time, again, not really relevant statistic in some sense, your CPU bound frame time, your GPU bound frame time, and your resolution scale. So I think for me, the most interesting metric there is just GPU time, because it does seem to be accurately transcribed there. And it's usually running very, very close to 16.67 milliseconds, which is no great surprise because they're really aggressively using DRS to keep frame times in check. So it is basically giving you the most resolution at any given moment, the most visual fidelity at any given moment, while still falling within that 60 FPS window. I know there's often a lot of chatter about people who want unlocked FPS modes in their titles that use VRR to give you some performance level that's higher than you'd otherwise get with a VSync lock. But the reality is, like a lot of these titles, they're very tightly calibrated to hit a certain frame rate target on consoles. They're very, very good at doing this. And so, when you remove that DRS, when you remove that frame rate cap, maybe that DRS behavior, if it's preserved, only gives you a very mild performance uplift. I think that would be the case here. So it gives you some insight into how developers are calibrating their games. We see this in some other titles as well. There's the FPS chart as well, which tells you whether the game is dropping frames. Now, of course, on Series X in this capture, I had a lot of trouble getting it to drop any frames at all. I actually could not get it to drop frames as I struggled to when I was testing the game a number of weeks ago. But it does drop frames on Series S in some more demanding sequences, like the beginning of Chapter 6. Then there's the RS chart, which I think is the resolution scaling chart. I tested the PC version as well. It seemed to indicate that RS stood for resolution scaling in that title. And it's bottoming out during heavy combat, in particular in the beginning of Chapter 6, which is a very demanding sequence. And it lightens dramatically. It goes into the green zone when you look up at the sky or you enter a menu. So I think the behavior here makes a lot of sense. It would be cool, though, if they actually showed you the real number, right? Which is actually what we saw when we looked at the developer tools for Spider-Man Remastered, or rather for Marvel Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 5, when Insomniac accidentally added that feature in a patch mistakenly and allowed players to explore the developer menu and do all kinds of tricks and all kinds of hacks, and that was very fun. That would be really cool here, because otherwise we just get this readout basically saying like, oh, the game's resolution is pegged really hard, but we kind of know that, generally speaking. It'd be fun to see the actual raw numbers here output by the game, perfectly accurate. That would be very cool here. But yeah, then there are a number of things here that I don't think are very important, like CPU time in particular. I don't think it's an accurate number here. I don't think at all, because it's just always maxed out at the same figures, basically. I don't think it means much. So really, I think the interesting settings here, to me, are the resolution scaling option and the GPU time, which both just basically show that id is pushing DRS very, very hard to try to deliver you a locked 60 FPS experience. And for the most part, across all console platforms, but especially on Series X, they deliver.
Yeah. Tom, what do you make of this footage?
Well, I love that it exists in the first place, and I think that this should be almost standard practice for a lot of developers to include because it's fairly inoffensive. It's not like breaking the logic of the game. It's just there, like on YouTube, there's a stats for nerds option, which I love. I love to just check out of curiosity, and it's the same for games. I mean, I think our eyes collectively light up at DF whenever we see some sort of hack like this. And I was kind of hoping maybe it'd be something similar to the Spider-Man 2 one, where we had a bit more sort of, a bit more visibility of how it works. Obviously, the res bounds are only color coded in this case, which is a bit vague, but we do know from pixel tests like Series S is going from 900p down to 648p lowest.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting to see where and when, but a bit more finesse in the detailing would have been nice. But yeah, at the same time, I just love the idea. I just wish we could have accessed like PC settings in some way through the sort of a back road. Like ray trace reflections was nice on PC, and we don't have it on console. So stuff like that would have been really funny to see. But that obviously would have been patched out right away if they caught wind of this being possible. So the CPU stats, as you say, Oliver, like look pretty useless. There's not much really going on there except to say it's maxed out. But what's so impressive to me is that the GPU side, and that it really is sitting so flush to hit 16.7 milliseconds, just bang on every time, and it shows how effective the DRS and VRS are in predicting how much GPU load is needed for the next frame. It's cutting it so fine, and I always think it's a bit of a magic trick somehow with a lot of other games using DRS, especially Assassin's Creed, where you can overload the engine by looking up and then come right back down with the camera, and the renderer just isn't prepared for that, and it needs to adjust the pixel count so quickly within like that split second. But it seems to not be an issue at all here. It seems to be really optimizing every frame perfectly, which is amazing to see.
Yeah. The concept of having PC style settings in a console game, it's an old chestnut that comes up all the time. And Oliver, of course, you're somewhat overwhelmed by some games which have so many different performance modes already. It's not quite the console experience. The concept of having it sort of tucked away somewhere for users to experiment with, I do think that's kind of harmless. And I think in the most games are probably played at the default setting anyway. People probably don't even visit the menu. So yeah, that's an interesting point. It would be curious to see, what would have happened if they'd enabled ray traced reflections and whatnot, bearing in mind some of the stuff that Alex found out by testing the game on the 4060. But I think, there does come a point where you have to kind of accept that a console is a console, and giving too much to the user could be counterproductive. And it also means a lot of further QA headaches for already overworked teams.
I'd love to see that on PS5 Pro in particular. I'm sure it could handle it. As Alex said, I think to me, we were DMing about it. It's very, very RDNA friendly ray tracing with the ray traced reflections even added into the mix. I'm sure PS5 Pro could handle that kind of additional strain. Although I think with the other console platforms, maybe you would want to prioritize a little bit more image quality above a nice to have, but not like fundamental to the visuals ray traced effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just love this just because it's a nice to have. It's almost like an Easter egg, so to speak. I'm not sure if it's intended behavior, but I'm loving it anyway. And I don't think it's been patched out yet. So, enjoy. But yes, the CPU thing is clearly inaccurate. It's sort of suggesting that the CPU is always maxed out. But, that's it. There it is. It's good stuff.